If you are visiting Edinburgh for the first time, make sure you watch this video. Hi, I'm Christina from happytowander.com, and I recently spent an amazing month in Edinburgh, Scotland, exploring all the best that this city has to offer. Of course, I did learn a lot the hard way, so in this video, I'm going to be walking you through all my best tips and must-knows for first-timers. Now, let's start with some basic must-knows and travel planning tips. First things first, we have to tackle the pronunciation of the city's name, because a lot of people get it wrong. So, to make sure we're all on the same page, let it be known that this city is pronounced like Edinburgh, not Edinburgh, Edinburgh, or any variation like that, Edinburgh. Of course, there are some differences when it comes to accents and things like that, but Edinburgh is a pretty safe approximation. Now, let's move on to our next important tip, which is to book ahead. Edinburgh is a very beautiful but compact and busy city, so oftentimes hotel prices might be a lot higher than you might be used to looking at other destinations. So your best defense against these sky-high prices is to simply book as early as possible, especially when it comes to peak season. On that note, it's also very important that you know when peak season is. So generally speaking, the busiest periods in Edinburgh tend to be focused around the different festival seasons of the year, namely August and also around Christmas and leading up to New Year. August is an especially busy time because that's when Edinburgh hosts a bunch of different festivals, including the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, which is actually the largest performing arts festival in the entire world. So, needless to say, accommodation can be in quite short supply, so your best defense really, if you do want to be in town for festival season, is to book as early as possible. If, on the other hand, you're not really interested in attending these events, then I highly recommend booking your trip outside of these periods, namely during shoulder season, so either spring or fall. That way you can avoid the chaos of the crowds because it can honestly be very, very overwhelming. Now, another important consideration when you're booking accommodation is the area. Luckily, Edinburgh is quite small and compact compared to other European capitals, so generally speaking, if you're staying within the city, then you're never going to be too far away from any of the main attractions, especially if you're close to a tram stop or bus stop. That said, if you find a really good deal that seems a little bit further out, so long as you're close to public transport, you're never too far away from the main sites, so I would say definitely go for it. Of course, if your budget allows for it, staying in the central core of Edinburgh will keep you within walking distance of most major sites. Just beware of areas like Old Town, which can be really, really hilly, because at the end of the day, after a long day of sightseeing, the last thing you want to do is huff and puff your way back to the hotel. So just keep that in mind, that there's a lot of hills, so you should take that into consideration. Now let's move on to Edinburgh transport tips and tips for getting around. In Edinburgh, you'll find two main train stations, Waverley and Haymarket. Waverley is the larger one in the city centre with 20 platforms and connections to pretty much anywhere you need to go in Scotland. It's also connected to a shopping centre, so if it's your first time there, I would highly recommend getting there well in advance just to make sure you have ample time to find where the train platforms are, because a lot of visitors do struggle with that. Haymarket, on the other hand, is a lot smaller and more manageable. So in any case, just keep in mind that there are two stations that are connected, so be sure to book for the one that's closer to where you're staying. Now, in terms of getting around the city, your main options are buses, trams, and taxis. With the local bus network, buses run 24 hours a day, with Lothian buses being the most popular company with 50+ routes across the city. Another one you'll see a lot is First. These different companies operate on the same routes, but with different bus numbers and also different tickets. Now, this might seem confusing, but it's honestly quite easy to simplify, just because these days the most common way to pay for the bus as a visitor is just by using contactless card. So regardless of which bus it is, you can just hop on board, tap in, and then they'll charge you the correct fare. Another great thing about paying with contactless card is a lot of these bus companies actually have daily and weekly caps in place to make sure that you're never paying more than a certain amount. So with Lothian buses, for instance, this program is known as Tap Tap Cap, which is very cute. First also has a program called Tap and Cap, which operates in a similar way. You can also pay with cash on board, but just take note that they don't give you any change, so you need to make sure you have the exact fare on you. Now, trams are a little bit more complicated. Trams in Edinburgh only run from 5:30 in the morning until 11:30 at night. And you have to make sure you buy a ticket in advance, either through the machines on the platforms or through their app or online. You also have to validate these tickets once you get on board. So it's a little bit more complicated than riding the bus, but also you don't have traffic to contend with, so there's definitely pros there as well. Lastly, if you plan to combine bus travel and tram travel while you're in Edinburgh, you can also look into day tickets or rider cards that allow you to combine modes of transport for a set fee, either for a day, a week, or a month. These passes tend to include various modes of transport like Edinburgh trams, Lothian buses, the airport bus, and a few others. So this can be an especially good deal if you're going to be taking public transport to and from the airport. All that said, once you're in the city centre, I personally think that the best way to get around is just by foot. Honestly, Edinburgh is such a beautiful city, and the more that you walk around, the more you really get to appreciate all the beautiful little streets and hidden secrets that there are. Sometimes it's even faster to walk versus taking the bus or a taxi, just because traffic can be really bad. Of course, it's worth saying if you do plan to do a lot of walking, Edinburgh is incredibly hilly, especially in the Old Town area, as I mentioned before. So make sure you plan your walk strategically to avoid doubling back, because it can be really exhausting to climb down some stairs because you thought it was pretty, and then you realize you have to climb back up in a few minutes just to get to your next destination. I would highly recommend actually taking public transport or a taxi to the highest point that you can, and then walking downhill to save yourself the physical labor. All right, now it's time to chat about Edinburgh attractions. First off, make sure you're always booking ahead. These days you can book pretty much any of Edinburgh's major attractions online in advance, which really saves you a lot of time compared to trying to queue up for tickets. In peak season, a lot of the major attractions, like Edinburgh Castle, can also actually sell out for the entire month. So if there are any major attractions you really have your heart set on, I'd highly recommend booking those well in advance. Now, in terms of how to get the best deals on attraction tickets in Edinburgh, make sure you know that not all sightseeing passes are created equal. For instance, the Edinburgh City Pass actually doesn't include a lot of the major sites like Edinburgh Castle or Holyrood Palace. Instead, if you're hoping to visit the trio of Edinburgh's royal attractions like Edinburgh Castle, Holyrood Palace, and the Royal Yacht Britannia, you should be looking into something called the Royal Edinburgh Ticket, which includes all three plus a bus tour for £65. There are also some other passes and potential memberships that you can look into, but honestly, those don't tend to be worth it unless you're going to be traveling around other places in Scotland besides Edinburgh. Now, while Edinburgh's main attractions can be quite pricey, one of my favorite things about the city is that there are so many cool attractions that are completely free. Some of my favorites include the Scottish National Museum, which is this stunning museum with an amazing terrace, and also a huge collection of interesting items, including Dolly the sheep. There's also the Scottish National Portrait Gallery, which is housed in the most stunning building and includes portraits and write-ups on prominent historical figures from Scotland's history. And lastly, there's the Scottish Parliament, which is a very unique building that's close to Holyrood Palace, and you can actually book a free tour to go see the inside. So that's definitely something that you should take advantage of if you're interested in architecture or politics, because it's quite a unique place to go. There are also some smaller museums in the city that are run by Edinburgh City Council. I'll be honest, these museums are quite outdated and they're quite small and not as extravagant as some of the other attractions in the city, but I do think they're worth visiting if you're interested in the particular subjects that the museums cover. So for instance, there's the Museum of Edinburgh, which covers local history. There's the People's Story Museum, which covers the history of the city through the lens of the people that lived in it. There's also the Writers' Museum, which is dedicated to some of Scotland's most famous writers. And there's the Museum of Childhood, which is the world's first museum dedicated to the concept of, you guessed it, childhood. So as you can see, it's actually quite simple to sightsee for free in Edinburgh, so don't get bogged down by all the paid attractions. Now a note on all things Harry Potter. So a lot of visitors come to Edinburgh thinking there's this huge connection between the city and Harry Potter in general. But just to clear things up, Harry Potter never actually filmed in Edinburgh, so there's no filming locations for you to visit that you'll recognize from the movies. And while J.K. Rowling did live in Edinburgh while she was writing the books, she has herself famously debunked a lot of the popular myths surrounding Edinburgh and Harry Potter. For instance, the claim that Victoria Street is the street that inspired Diagon Alley, or that the Elephant House Cafe is the birthplace of Harry Potter. So take what you hear about Harry Potter in Edinburgh with a grain of salt, and just know that there is so much more to see in this city than just a vague connection to Harry Potter. Although I will say those vaguely magic-themed shops are definitely taking over the city. Now, another important must-know is that despite the fact it's known as one of the top must-sees in Edinburgh, Arthur's Seat is actually quite a difficult hike, so don't pressure yourself to do it just because it's a must-do. Because during my time there, I definitely saw many unprepared tourists who didn't realize just how steep the hike was going to be, because it's still within the city, but it is a massive extinct volcano, so it's not going to be an easy climb, and so if you're not particularly athletic, don't pressure yourself into doing it because it is quite difficult. But if you do choose to do it, one thing I'll recommend is actually exiting and heading southeast instead of heading back into the city center. And the reason I recommend that is if you actually follow the path down southeast, then you can end up at one of the oldest pubs in Scotland, if not the oldest. And it's called the Sheephead Pub, and it's really cute, really cozy, and does a fabulous roast dinner on Sundays. And on that note, don't be afraid to expand your sightseeing itinerary beyond the very city center, because there are a lot of really cute neighborhoods and unique places to visit kind of just outside of the main central core. So Stockbridge, for instance, is a very cute neighborhood with lots of lovely boutiques and cafes and bookshops. And Leith is also a very vibrant and dynamic part of the city with lots of cool food spots and pubs. Now on that note, let's move on to Edinburgh food and drink tips. First, you should know that Edinburgh has a very diverse food scene, with everything ranging from chippies, selling deep fried everything like pizza and Mars bars, all the way to upscale seafood restaurants serving really refined Scottish fare. So definitely make the most of exploring the food scene while you're here. If you're interested in Scottish food, there are definitely some fun must-tries that I can highly recommend. I actually do really enjoy haggis, so I would recommend getting that. It's usually served with neeps and tatties, which is mashed turnip and mashed potato. And there's also Cullen skink, which is a creamy fish soup. Now, if you're looking for food recommendations, what I can highly recommend is seeking out local Edinburgh foodies to get the scoop on what to eat, because obviously if they live in the city, they know best. So what I'll usually do is I'll go on social media, either Instagram or TikTok, and look at people who live in Edinburgh, find foodie accounts, and kind of get my food recommendations from there. Some really cool accounts that I can highly recommend include Fedinburgh, Top Scottish Scran, and Hannah Scrans. Another must-know is to book ahead for restaurants. So oftentimes with popular spots, especially the ones that have been featured on social media, they can be booked out really far in advance. So make sure you book a table if there's a place that you really have your heart set on. Do take note though that during festival season, like in August, a lot of restaurants won't even take any bookings just because that's how busy it gets. Now, while in Edinburgh, I could also recommend booking some kind of whiskey experience, because after all, you are in Scotland, so why not give it a try? If you're not really a whiskey person, but you're curious to learn more, then what I would really highly recommend, rather than just doing a tasting, is actually booking a whiskey experience where you learn more about the process that whiskey is made and also how to properly enjoy it. In Edinburgh, there's two main popular ones that are quite touristy, but also really well known. The first one is the Scotch Whisky Experience, which is located right next to Edinburgh Castle, and I've heard really great things about that. And more recently, there's the Johnny Walker Experience on Princess Street, which is one that I recently did. And I hate to admit it because it was super cheesy, but I loved it. As someone who didn't know a lot about whiskey, I thought it was so much fun. It's very vibrant, very dynamic, a lot of multimedia. It's very slick, and just overall, I totally left that experience like a Johnny Walker convert. Like I genuinely bought a bunch of bottles at duty free. So it is a bit like a brainwashing experience, but it's also very fun and quite a fun way to get to know whiskey in a very unintimidating way. If that's not what you're looking for though, and you're looking for something quieter, maybe less over the top, then there's still a bunch of different tours and tastings that you can book. So the sky is really the limit when it comes to whiskey tours in Edinburgh. Be sure to put it on your list though, it's super fun. There is of course more to the local booze scene than just whiskey though. In fact, gin is actually a pretty big deal in Edinburgh, so if that's more your speed, you can actually tour distilleries for gin or get gin pretty much everywhere you go as well. All right, finally, let's move on to some Edinburgh tips for when you arrive. First of all, you should learn how to pronounce some commonly mispronounced names just in case you have to ask for directions or say any of the names out loud. For instance, this is pronounced Holyrood, this is pronounced Coburn, this neighborhood is Leith, and this is pronounced Lothian. There are also some common words you might come across that you might not know the meaning of. For instance, kirk means church, I means yes, scran means food, tatty means potato, and a dram is a small glass of a very alcoholic drink, so for instance, whiskey. Next, you should know that jaywalking is very common in Edinburgh. There's a common joke actually that you can tell how local someone is to Edinburgh based on how impatient they are to cross the street. Most of the time, so long as there are no cars coming, locals will be crossing the street. So my word of advice is really to just stick with someone who looks like they know what they're doing and go with them. Another must know is to dress for the weather by always bringing a rainproof and windproof jacket. Weather in Edinburgh is very unpredictable, so you might get sun one second and then rain and wind the next second. I think it's always good to be prepared because you never know when it's gonna rain, and it's also always better to bring a jacket versus an umbrella just because the Scottish wind is no joke. And bear in mind you will be walking a lot when you're in Edinburgh, and those cobblestones can get slippery in the rain, so make sure you bring shoes that have a really good grip and don't be bringing shoes just because they're cute and leave those heels at home. Lastly, when shopping for souvenirs, I would say stay away from those really touristy shops along the Royal Mile, just because a lot of the time those stores are selling mass-produced goods that aren't necessarily of high quality, especially if you're buying things like tartan scarves. Instead, what I would recommend is actually stopping in an independent shop instead and getting something that will be of higher quality and also probably be more unique than your standard souvenir shop stuff. One really cool place I came across was Tron Kirk, which is actually located on the Royal Mile as well. And inside you'll find a maker's market where there's basically different stall holders and they're all local makers who have Edinburgh themed souvenirs. And it's very cool and really worth taking a look. All right, I hope you enjoyed those Edinburgh travel tips. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe for more practical travel videos just like this one. I'll see you guys next week. Bye!